Remember that time a few weeks ago when I made a video on those hidden destructor methods in GameMaker, and then like the next day Russell K saw it, said no, and removed it in the very next beta? Good times. Hello all you crazy people out there, my name is Michael, I like wizards and dragons and making games, and today we're going to be talking about the way that you are intended to do what a lot of people might use destructors for, and that is weak references. As many of you are probably aware, there is no official built-in way to detect when a struct is garbage collected, at least there isn't anymore. But you can use these things called weak references to indirectly check whether or not an instance of a struct has been cleared away by the garbage collector. So I'm going to create myself an object. Let's call it object1, the best object name. Let's throw it in a room, which is called room1, which is the best room name. And I'm going to go in the object's create event. I'm just going to go and let's create a struct. So I'm going to say, let's say instance, I guess I can spell it out. Instance is going to be equal to, and this is just going to be a struct. We can have it be an empty struct. We can have it actually contain data if we want. Doesn't matter what the struct is. All right, this has been part of GameMaker for almost 2 years now. We know how this works. Actually, I believe the day that this video is going to be posted, April 23rd, 2022, is actually the second anniversary of when GameMaker Studio 2 hit open beta. Do not ask me why I know that, and yet I do not remember either of my sister's birthdays. So we're gonna pretend I didn't just incriminate myself and call a function weak ref create. And weak ref create is a function, and it takes one argument. The argument being the thing to track, and that is a struct. So we can create a weak reference like this. We can pass in an instance of a struct that we want to keep track of. And we can save the weak reference as something like, let's just say, reference to instance is going to equal weak ref create. And by the way, I love how the argument is literally just called thing to track, and it's not just called something like technical, like, I don't know, instance or struct or whatever. Thing to track sounds like something that I would have called it, which is probably a very good reason why nobody has me writing documentation for them. But anyway, so this weak reference is going to be a sort of shadowy reference to the instance, and you can use it to detect whether or not the instance has been garbage collected yet. As I mentioned, if you type weak underscore control space into the code editor, you can see that there's only 3 functions that are part of the weak reference system. It's a very small, like, subsystem of GameMaker. There's weak ref create, which I just talked about, and there's weak ref alive and weak ref any alive, which you can probably guess are related to each other. And weak ref alive is going to do what I just mentioned a minute ago, and it's going to tell you whether or not the instance that the weak reference points to has been garbage collected or not. So if I were to go into something like the draw GUI event, so let's go any of the draw events, I don't really care. Where is draw? If we go into the draw GUI event, and if I just draw text, it's going to be really small on the screen, and then I'm going to want to like zoom in the video, and that's going to be a lot of work, isn't it? All right, I'll use a bigger font. This is 20 point boldface caliber. That should be easier to read. If I were to draw some text on the screen, we can say draw text in the corner of the screen, 3232, and weak ref alive. And what did I call? I think I called it reference to instance. So we can display the value of this function on the screen, and I will label it like this. This is going to currently always be a 1, because the struct that the weak reference is tracking is never like removed, it's never garbage collected. If I were to run the game, you're going to see exactly that. So weak ref alive is going to be 1. I wish that now that Boolean types were like actual types in GameMaker, when you stringified them, they actually like displayed true or false, but oh well. Anyway, so if we were to do something that were to remove the struct from the game, so if I were to say if keyboard check pressed vk underscore spacebar is probably the non-alphabet key that's closest to my hands on the keyboard. So we can say just instance is going to be undefined. If we set the variable containing the instance to undefined, then eventually GameMaker's garbage collector will notice that there is nothing in the game that refers back to that struct, and it will delete it. And we should see, when I do that, weak ref alive changes to 0. And I'm not doing any fancy destructors. I'm not explicitly calling like a destroy method or anything on the struct. We are just keeping track of the weak reference to that struct, and when it is removed by the garbage collector, then weak ref alive will stop being true, and you can use that to figure out that that the struct has been removed from the game, and any potential cleanup that you might have to do, you can do that. So knowing what the system does is really only about half the job. How you might use this is another matter entirely. I need to emphasize that there is no correct way to use weak references. The weak reference system in GameMaker just is a structure that gives you a little bit of information, yes or no, has this thing been deleted or not? And then what you do with that information is 100% up to you. You remember how when you were in 7th grade and you'd be taking a test and you'd find an open-ended question and it would say there are no wrong answers, and then you'd put down whatever you want and then your teacher would mark it wrong anyway if they didn't like it? Yeah, weak references are nothing like your 7th grade English teacher. So what I like to do with these things is, say you have a dynamic structure in one of your structs that needs to be explicitly destroyed. In the days of old, that might have been something like a DS map create, or maybe a DS list create. As GameMaker moves forward, GameMaker is trying to de-emphasize the different data structures in favor of just structs and arrays, which are automatically garbage collected and you don't need to use a destroy method on. Hence this video. So to maybe make this video age a little bit less poorly, we can do something like surface create. If you have a struct that comes with a surface, let's say dimensions can be like 40 and 40. The way this demo works right now, if you were to just run the game and then hit the spacebar to delete the struct, the surface that you created with it would continue to exist, and it would be considered a memory leak because there is no reference in the game pointing back to it. And you would instead need to manually free the surface when you're done with it. And you can use the weak references to keep track of that. What I might do is, instead of having a reference to instance be only the weak reference itself, I might make reference to instance a struct of its own. And this would be something like, the reference can be weak ref create, taking instance as the parameter, and surface to free can be instance.surface. And this does kind of put you in a bit of a turtles all the way down situation. And that now we have a second struct, which also contains a reference to the surface. And if you really wanted to give people who are trying to read your code a big headache, you could create a weak reference to the weak reference, and then you'd just be going in circles. But we'll assume that you, as the programmer, have designed your code such that once the weak reference has been acted upon, then you don't need it anymore. Hey. So instead, let's update the draw GUI event a little bit. Instead of saying weak ref alive reference to instance, we can say this dot ref, because that is now the weak reference. Oh, cool. That is highlighted in red, presumably because it's a... when you hit the keyboard, the instance is set to undefined. All right, we know that. And then we can say, and you can put this in just the step event, or you can put it in the end step event, or you can put it in any other event. You can put this in like an alarm if you want this check to only run periodically, and not every frame. If not weak ref alive, reference to instance.ref, then we can say if reference to instance.surface. What did I call it? Was it surf? Surface to free. If surface exists, reference to instance.surface that we want to free, then we can surface free. I have some very long variable names here. And then for good measure, just so that we can have some confirmation that the surface has been freed, show debug message. We'll just print out a message to the console that informs us that okay, it is surf. A slightly shorter variable name than what I have for a lot of the other things. The weak reference is alive. The surface has yet to be freed down here. If I hit the spacebar, weak ref alive is displaying 0. And in the console, we can see that the weak ref has died and the surface has been freed. And the memory that was used by the surface has been reclaimed by the graphics card. And this doesn't have to be a surface. This can be a buffer. This can be a vertex buffer. This can be some other data structure that you want to destroy when the struct has died. So another thing that you can do, and this isn't my favorite way to use weak references, but if you were to just set this to, if you were to go back to reference instance just being the weak reference and nothing else, if you were to show the value of this reference instance in just a message box or in the console or some other way of showing it to the user, that needs to be a semicolon, then you'll see that weak references themselves are structs. We can see that the value of reference instance is just a struct which contains a reference to the struct that we're tracking, and pretty much nothing else. And because of this, you can kind of treat these as structs. You can just tack on, whatever variables you want to the struct, and it will be fine. And this will save you from having to have like a secondary struct and checking to see if like weak ref alive, reference dot reference, or anything somewhat cyclical like that. And this will work. You can keep track of the weak reference like this. It will behave the same as before. We see the weak ref alive, true or false at the top. We can see in the console when I hit the spacebar very loudly, the weak ref has died and the surface has been freed. Some people may not like this. Some people may not want to just like tack on variables like this to structs, or especially to like a weak reference, which is kind of a special struct to GameMaker. But it is an option. Now, in practice, it is more likely that instead of just having a single weak reference value like this in an actual game that you're actually trying to make with lots of structs that you want to keep track of and detect when they've been garbage collected, it's more likely that you'll actually have something like an array. If I were to just create a variable called references, which is going to be assigned to an empty array, and then later on we can array push weak, array push onto the references array, weak ref create, like that. And then, and I'm not going to go too far into this because by this point, most of you probably understand what the system does, but in an actual game in the real world, it's more likely that you'll have an array of weak references, and then in the step event, or periodically in an alarm or something like that, or in room end maybe, you could either loop over the array, and check to see if weak ref alive on every member of the array, and you could keep track of things that way. You could make your own like memory management system, or you could use the other weak reference function that I haven't really talked about, weak ref alive any, and this will check in an array to see if any or all of the weak references have died or not, and you could use that perhaps. Depends on what you want to do, but that is weak references. That is the official way to do in GameMaker what you might otherwise do with a destructor. I hope you all found this useful, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Then Nothing Happened, Squarecrow, Sindra Larson, Posho, Gunnar Clovis, GameMaker, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, and Army Armbruster for supporting these videos. If you want to see your name in the credits or hear yourself shouted out at the end like this, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.